Hey Deepak, thanks for joining us on the podcast to share your learnings and experiences with building AI-enabled teams and products at DwellFi.
Thank you, Raj.
Thanks. So I guess maybe before we get started, a little bit about DwellFi, just so that the listeners can understand why you're qualified to speak about this topic. Obviously, you're leveraging, AI
Oh,
as part of
yeah.
your process.
For sure. DwellFi started as a tokenization, real world asset tokenization startup, and we started serving the private asset industry, and more we realized the amount of unstructured information which exists in the industry. Tokenization goal cannot be achieved without AI, so we started investing in AI a lot, and then we are realizing that is actually the true pain, and then tokenization is going to be a byproduct when the time is right. I mean, we were a little ahead of our time at that time, so we have doubled down into basically taking all sort of documents which exist in the private asset, from passport, IDs, PII data, bank statements, to RPA, which is basically browser automation, desktop automation, and this all the things which are needed for the industry. So we have invested in all these areas, and have built agentic OS, which essentially have given us these founding pillars on which we basically customize and build the last mile agents which customers need.
Great. Thank you. Thanks. I think that's helpful.
Mhm.
So I guess we can start jumping into the two areas that we want to talk about. First is how you are using AI to enable your teams, both in terms of the tools, the processes and practices and so forth. And that's the first part. And then the second part, we wanted to talk a little bit about how the product itself is AI enabled. So let's start off with the enabling the teams. I guess one of the things, obviously, that I'm interested in to start off first with is leading by example, right? So maybe if you can talk a little bit about how you're thinking about sort of, leading by example for enabling your teams as part of this journey.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think by now pretty much everybody is using it, and then these things has been there around for some time, which is basically meeting notes. If you think about, right, that's the smallest aspect of AI, which I think there are people who don't use it right now for some whatever privacy reasons, but they're recording the meetings anyways. So idea is, why not use transcription and note taking and whatnot with AI? You will be surprised how immensely productive that session is. So we have encouraged that within the whole engineering team. So that way, when meetings are happening, pretty much every meeting is getting transcompiled into notes. Those notes then gets basically uploaded into a shared drive, and that shared drive is basically then fed into our own agentic platform, where we can at any day summarize the whole week highlights of who chatted what and how and what are the decisions. So if you think about like this would have been otherwise a regular 25 page or 15 page cross functional like update, which now can happen automatically, and it's essentially like a game changer that way, and then that just is different. I mean, I can't imagine going back.
Sure, sure. Right. So I guess in terms of the skills aspect of it, how do you think about that in terms of supporting your team with provisioning resources for learning and upskilling in terms of AI tools and technologies?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges, which I mean, AI is a great tool. I think pretty much every company, every business is going to suffer from is how do you reskill your team, and then the learning is basically, and the team members are in different stages of life, and how do you make sure everybody is learning, kind of a thing, if you think about, right? So we have actually come up with a framework where there is a higher level budget of around $100 a month per person. An idea is then and then that gets allocated to different AI tools, some in experimentation, some goes to basically standardization across the board. So idea is, hey, here is like $20-$30 which every person can use for whatever makes sense. And if that becomes something great, then we have to sacrifice something else so that that can be the baseline for everybody. So like that we started, and we have introduced a lot of tools into our development flow, from coding review to design doc review, and UX review, many other. So pretty much every stage of a software development life cycle, if you think about it. And each one basically comes with its own challenges in how do you customize it, how do you learn. So in all this is a very important culture is essentially, on daily basis, how am I becoming better with AI? So every day in our stand-ups, we are actually covering these things where as people are finding new insights, specifically, pitfalls. Hey, yesterday I was doing this, and with AI, I was going in some infinite loop. I'm asking question, it's taking me in this direction which I shouldn't have gone. So AI is great at misguiding, specifically if you have a team of a lot of young talent, because they don't have the experience. They have the theoretical knowledge. So when they put a question, it can be failing for a million reasons. So they're solving the wrong problem. So idea is how do you mentor that team into recognizing that AI is taking in a wrong direction, and basically theoretically testing out all the possibilities before digging deeper into one and spend the entire day troubleshooting. So yeah. So basically, every day we have to reflect and then share each other the learnings and the pitfalls, and then collectively the team gets better.
Sounds good. I guess that's a good segue into what we wanted to talk a little bit more in terms of the processes and practices across each of the SDLC lifecycle areas. We can start off with the requirements and ideation phase. We can share a little bit about how you've been leveraging some of the AI tools and technologies in the requirements and ideation phase of your SDLC.
Sure. I think it begins with the meeting notes capture, if you think about, right? So previously, specifically when you are in an office environment, there's a lot of whiteboards and stuff you can ideate and draw and whatnot. But when you are in a virtual remote setup, you can draw, but that's very distracting because the modern computing devices are not meant to for me to move my finger around and draw something and people can see it and whatnot, right? So we all tend to talk a lot. An idea is, hey, from there, how do you translate that into a mind map? And then from there, high level object, ideas and whatnot. And then once that session is over, then we translate that into using prompt engineering into like a more of a high level requirement document. And then from there, we then take it over and then move it into cursor and then look at our code. Hey, given our source code, now write the architecture and design specification and how exactly can we achieve this. And then basically we spend around maybe 2-3 hours with a couple of engineers. So we call it joint design doc review and creation at the same time. So we all are reading the document, we are providing the feedback, we are asking the AI on the side that, hey, review this theoretically. What do you think about this? We only have 2 weeks or we have only 1 week to deliver this. And it changes the design. And one of the reasons to do that is, think of this way, the senior engineers are the conductor of the meeting. So they are the one who's sharing the screen and they have everything done. And the junior engineers are the one who are actually asking questions. So typically, if you see the setup is the other way around. So most of the orgs are doing it wrong, where the senior folks are actually asking, they're not doing. But it should be other way around, and that is where the leadership, leading by example, where you have to become proficient enough that your team is inspired from you, and they are basically, asking the right questions on their off time. And then once we do few of these sessions, what I've started seeing is what pretty much every engineering team hate is writing design docs, and now that's the first thing we are doing. And that is very important in the era of AI, which is capturing the requirements and then capturing them in such a way that the design which comes out is the most efficient design, and not in speed and performance. It's the human input. Like, hey, this is something I can conceptualize in morning, and this is something I can have by the evening done in production. And that's the speed we are talking about.
Yep.
From UX, database design, API design to everything in between done.
Sounds good. I think that's an excellent insight, Deepak, in terms of how you are thinking and approaching the design review process in terms of the senior engineers driving it and yeah, having participation from the rest of the team. Thanks for sharing that. That's really interesting. Continuing along, most people think of AI tools primarily just from a coding standpoint, and glad we spent some time talking about how you're leveraging it in the requirements and then the design phase. Maybe briefly we can touch upon on the coding aspect of things, how you and your team approach leveraging some of these AI tools and technologies.
Yeah, for sure. I think on the previous response, if you think about in a regular any firm which is engineering oriented or per se anything, you have procedural guidelines. Most of the time, those are either in the head of the senior engineers or written somewhere but never updated, and nobody else is aware of it. And then everybody is fist fighting over the pull request that, hey, your code is not up to the standard, that standard. So if you think about, you're reducing the velocity of change. So what we did first thing is basically took all our coding guidelines, all the preferences, line length, width, coding standard, variable names, location, architecture, how something, and we have codified that as an instruction. If you think about, like, as a human being have to go and read, and then we have moved that from all these wikis and notions and confluences to actually source code. So that's another thing we actually, which is like reverse. It used to happen that way, but then people move them up, and then we have to bring it down. And one of the reasons to do that is all these modern AI IDs, I would call them. Cursors is there, there is a windsurf, and there are a couple more, and all of them are great. It's just how which one you want to use. They suddenly have a lot more context about how to write the code, because they can write the code, but how to write it for your code base, your convention, and your preferences or guidelines and whatnot, and becoming like a true engineer of part of your team. They're still doing a bad job at it, I mean, in certain areas, but on an average, they take away the 80% of the grunt work. So think of this way, from that meeting notes to the design requirements, that's like 2-3 hours. From there to that first 80% draft is another 2 hours. And then the effort left is not just testing, and then doing some fixes. And there are some strategies around that, and we can discuss. It's a longer answer, but that's essentially the key, which is basically now becoming, because the coding guidelines have to become the rule which AI can also follow, and you have to bring it down from somewhere theoretical or in your mind, or maybe some other document, into the code itself, so it lives and breathes with the code.
Yeah, sounds good. I guess you talked about the testing phase of it. Now that we've talked about the implementation, the coding aspect of it, I think you had mentioned earlier during some of our conversations that the bottleneck has now moved to testing, right? And so it'll be interesting to know how you're approaching that challenge in terms of dealing with the testing bottleneck with these AI-powered tools.
Okay. Absolutely. And so in the testing, I think it's like, again, another cultural shift. If you think about an engineering org, a lot of people start their career as developers. It's very rare you will see that, oh, I want to become a tester first. Tester is something people become somehow magically. And I started my career as a developer, but then got another job as a QA. And then I feel like that's fortunate, because QA is a mindset. It's not a thing. And mindset in finding bugs and theoretically understanding a requirement and guessing where something can be broken. And that's essentially that gut feel is necessary to basically work with AI. So you can be an amazing developer, and if you're not a great QA, you can never leverage AI in the best way possible. So you have to basically become the QA first before you can become a better AI developer. So what we have started doing is we have started rotating our engineers in the seat of a QA. So we still have a QA person, but he's now basically looking into overall guidelines and how to test, what to test, and whatnot. But he's not testing, if you think about it. So he's mentoring other people in, like, hey, where that mindset is coming from, right? And then what that helping is, when developers are trained with this mindset, they are actually building the code where it's less bugs. They are basically, now they are not developers. The QA, the AI is the developer. They are the QA, and that is the mindset we are basically bringing into the people. And I have started seeing the changes which are in positive direction, if you think about it. And then it all started because there was an engineer who was amazing without AI, but the moment we introduced this free AI layer to everybody, the code quality started getting dropped. So he got into this mindset, he said, fix this, do this, and do this, and he started trusting the whole thing instead of questioning it, and that started leading to a lot of bugs. So the idea is, a QA will never do that. Like, QA always comes to the job every day that developer has broken something. So and a developer have to try really hard to prove that it's not broken. So same thing need to happen with AI as well, which is you have to trust that, hey, everything is broken, this is wrong, and you have to basically counter question the system again and again and again to get to a conclusion that it's done. And that's the only way you can work at speed, and then deliver something of quality.
Yep. Again, great insight. I remember earlier in your career, in our careers working together at EMC. your role and participation in the team there. And it's as you said, lucky that sometimes people get the opportunity to work across the two boundaries and learn the mindset, right? As in your case. So I'm glad that that experience has helped shape how you're approaching some of these AI tools and technologies. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Deepak. I guess continuing along on the other aspects that I wanted to spend a little bit time on, because one that people see a lot of productivity improvements is a lot of this on the prototyping, the proof of concept, the experimentation phase of it, right? They talk about maybe 900% efficiency improvements, but then when you look at things like maintaining production code and so forth, it's they're only talking about maybe 30% or so efficiency improvement. So talking a little bit on the debugging and maintenance phases of the SDLC, any insights that you would like to share in terms of how you've been leveraging AI in the debugging and maintenance phases of the SDLC?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, what we have started realizing, and it's all part of that, the daily stand-up insight we did, is there is a way if you ask the question. I mean, people call it prompt engineering if you think about it. And there is a way if you phrase the question for a certain objective, you are getting more optimal answer. So most of the time, what people do when they're using AI is they have a very broken communication with the system. They will copy paste something and say, fix this, do this, and nothing else they are going to talk about it. And then suddenly AI is great at it. It's like Google search. You put a word and you will get something. So the thing is gonna just come back with something, and then because you are in that level of thinking, you're like, oh yeah, okay, this that, and you end up wasting 4 or 5 hours, and you're still there, no issues solved, right? But instead, if you can explain, hey, I was in the Kubernetes environment, there was this customer API call, and this happened, and this was the response, and my guess is or my suspicion is this. Can you quickly come up with 5 or 6 possible root cause directions I can take? And then from there, each one you ask, why did you think this is possibly could be an issue? So it's also education, and that is very important, specifically for the fresh grads or the junior folks. I mean, people who have spent 10, 15 years troubleshooting things, they have no problem. They can read the BS in the chat response and then say, yeah, this is garbage. But people who are like just out of the college, they don't have that experience, and the only way they can have that experience is by this mindset, which is the art of asking the right question at the right time, and then basically reading the like responses, and then whether trusting it or counter questioning it, kind of a thing. So that is very important on the troubleshooting side, which is basically chatting it as if we're talking to a human, because AI don't talk back. It gives you an answer from the moment you talk to it. It never say, hey, what do you mean this? It will never do that. And I wish it would have done that. People would have been more productive. But all these AI companies want to impress the customer with a single shot answers. So idea is, hey, you throw something and we'll give an answer, like like a super impressive mode kind of a thing. But that is actually a bit more bad, because then the other side have to be trained on like the behaviors of the system, if you think about, right? So we are working on an agent which is more interactive and for beginners. So idea is it trains you by asking the question that, hey, I have taken your question and then let me rephrase it. Is this what you mean? And then if you say yes, great. And then over time, if you think about, you're training that person to type it. And in some cases, I'm lazy at typing also. So what we do is we do voice inputs. So most of these IDs also have voice input. So you paste your message and then you voice your concern. So that way you are faster if you think about it. So you don't have to type it, and then that leads to like a better and more accurate results. The other thing we have seen is in the last mile of keeping the production quality code is basically again the same coding guidelines. If you think about, there are different ways of asking and prompting the system when you're writing the requirements, and then you're getting that first draft. But once the first draft is done, then you have this code review checklist, which all the senior folks have. Is the variables are this way? Is this there? Are you using any tight loop? Are you using logging in this loop? Like whatever. Different domains have different checklists, if you think about, right? And that checklist is what we give it to AI system to prove that that the code is good or not. And then once that is done, then we do, hey, think it like an QA, like what are the scenarios I should be testing. So then the system basically gives you a scenario file. Then idea is, hey, how, and then you just go about testing it. And that is where we have seen some innovation, if you think about. These days, I mean, in early days, I'm sure you also know Selenium automation was there, where, but that thing never worked. It was so painful, if you think about it, because UX keeps changing and million other things, right? So, but there is still a concept called red-green cycle, development cycle, if you think about it, which is where you write the behavior of the product first and then you build the product. So with AI, you have the requirement, then you write the behavior, and then you write the code in between. And once this code is done, you don't worry too much about APIs and all that, at least in that first 80 draft mindset. First you do is you finish the product, and then you have this test, which actually can try to go on the UI using AI again, and then actually try to click the buttons like a real human being, if you think about it, right? So now the UI automation, or you can say how the customer is going to consume it, can actually be controlled by AI, because all you have to do is describe it. Hey, go into the portal, log in, then find a place to click there. And AI is most of the time very great at it. So you can leverage that to automate the manual UI testing. And that leads to, if you think about that, you are really testing an end-to-end system. So that will allow you to test all the happy paths really fast. And once that is done, you can focus and talk to AI saying, hey, now focus on all the negative paths and just write the unit test for them, because those are the ones which you really have to mock, like a lot of weird states to just get it done. And then you ship it much faster than otherwise.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks. I guess we can wrap up on the building team side with deployment and operations. If you want to share any insights in terms of how you've been leveraging AI in the deployment and operations phase of the SDLC.
Yeah, for sure. I think in deployment side, we like, if you think about, other than people signing off and the test being running, where we leverage it a lot is has been traditionally painful is release notes. What has changed? So now what we have done is we have written a CLI and some wrappers around it, where you say, hey, I want to release, this is my tag, go to the previous release, find all the tags and commits and whatnot. And historically thinking, if you think about, all the program managers used to do this, but they're only going to take the commit logs and try to infer what it is. So now what we have told AI is, don't do that. Take the whole commit log, take the thing, read the file's content, if you think about, and then summarize a much more larger change, which the SRE reads. And from there, we again create a much more concise, if you think about, release note, which is more, like, hey, make it a customer friendly, or make it a engineering support, or maybe something else, right? And then you identify the gaps in, hey, do we need some upgrade procedure? Do we need something else? So now basically you have now, this is like last mile checking before going production, like all the checklists which we historically have done over committees. So a release could be ready on Monday, but we couldn't release for next 10 days because stars are not aligning. With this, you can be much faster if the release is of quality, but at the same time flag things which are of concern. What environment variables to set, if you think about it. That's the most common thing which breaks, because somebody will add a new variable, nobody knows where it is. But now, since you are doing the commit to commit, in-depth real-time review, the SRE can say, hey, there are these new environments which I don't have in my config. What is this? Then you can ask AI to give you the description, and then you basically add it in that. So that's where you can reduce the production breakages because of lack of poor documentation, if you think about it.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that experience on the deployment and operations side of things. So let's jump into enabling your products with AI. You talked about the products you're building at DwellFi. Maybe if you want to share a little bit more on some of the agents that you're building and how they have been AI enabled and helping with the productivity improvements at your customers.
Yeah. So I think if you like rewind the time, maybe 5 years, 10 years back, and before that there were like something called SOAPs and XML, and then after that, the REST API came into the picture, and everything was API first. So right now the new era is MCP first, if you think about, right. So as we are designing our products, we have to internally think about how all our modules are AI friendly. Okay. Once that is done, we have this core layer which actually understands all the create, delete, destroy, all those operations within the product, which are obviously safeguarded and everything. And then obviously there is a API necessary for UI to work. But now what we are doing on the UI side also is like, hey, I have to create this input form from this user. Can you give me some default values? That's a very common, if you think about, like a product experience problem. That hey, so that's where we bring in templates, where we may have pre-built templates which customer can choose and all that. But again, too many parameters to deal with. So idea is we are changing most of our UI in a way that is intention driven. The customer is going to say, hey, create this folder. For example, very simple thing. In our case, we have knowledge libraries. Say, hey, what do you want to create? What are you going to store there? So customer can describe a little bit. Once that is done, then we basically create a recommended configuration, which is optimized for that need, which otherwise customer have to read documentation and tweak parameters. Oh, should I enable AI processing? Should I enable advanced AI processing? Or should I enable embedding? Or should I enable entity detection as well? And million other parameters, right? Like how do you educate customers with all this? So this will allow to do that, which is basically, hey, here, just come and describe what you want to store and let us recommend what could be a default, form creation in the product. Okay, that's one approach. The other is cross-feature automation. For example, you are in a what do you call a place where you keep your documents, if you think about, right? And there is another place where you may have maintain your spreadsheets. So idea could be, say, here is a document, can you take this and convert it into a spreadsheet? So now that's a cross-feature communication where AI can act as a lot of gluing and then can improve the experience a lot. So those are the things which we are embedding within the product for customers. But underlying engine, there is a lot of other innovation if you think about, right? So the underlying engine itself, what we have basically done is we have added agentic decision-making process at every layer if you think about. So first and foremost is basically the layer where the user question comes in, like how databases do planning. We go through the planning. The planning idea is, hey, what are my choices available? What is the user question? What could be a potential output? And make all the decision and come up with a plan and what is the right way to go about it. Oh, in order to answer this question, I need to research on internet. I need to research on these type of documents and million other things based on the constraints. So that is the layer. Once that layer runs, then essentially, if you think about the next stage comes in, which is basically executing these tools, which is, hey, go there, get the data. That is where MCP plays a lot of role. If you think about MCP is the model context protocol, almost like APIs. An idea here is these are designed for AI system to pull push information depending upon the capacity. So that layer brings in the data. Then there is an introspection layer which looks at the data and decides whether this is right or wrong. Okay, and this is where you will probably, Raj, feel like it's almost like the file system problem.
Mhm.
From when I am writing a file system, which pages to bring into the Linux kernel memory is always a challenge. So you figure out based on different strategies. So in this case, it is called the nodes or the context nodes or embeddings, which have to be brought into the LLM context, and that have to be based on the question, the recentness, and many other parameters. And then how do you flip them around, and how do you figure out? And a lot of the people when they implement, right, you have to also understand that, hey, have I visited this node at least in my current quest? If yes, then ignore it. Don't visit that node again and again, right? Sometimes systems, these agents are very poor at it, so they keep repeating that. And then doing all that, and then basically going to the last stage of generating the response. And once the response is generated, then applying the security and privacy layer. That, hey, response is generated, but then is this person supposed to receive this response? Maybe there is a PII data, or maybe we need to eliminate something. And then once all that is done, basically then you push it back to the customer. So if you think about it, are like there are several architecture you can choose. We have decided to go with multi-agent. I mean, we internally now started calling them periodic table of agents. So we have agent H, which is the hydrogen, if you think about the foundation, which is basically the core, which does everything, and then everything else is extended from it. They are doing something special. And agent AU, which is gold, is our QA agent.
Interesting way to think about how you've structured your agents around the platform. Thank you. Thanks, Deepak. It's great hearing about your experiences in terms of building AI-enabled teams and products at DwellFi. Thanks again for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Raj. Very welcome.